Welcome to Stay Sharp in Digital Engineering, your insider's edge on all things digital in the world of engineering, products, and manufacturing. In this episode of Stay Sharp, Jonathan Scott and I sit down with Rob Ferrone to explore Agentic AI in digital engineering. We unpack its definition, its game-changing potential for workflows, and what it means for jobs in an AI-driven future. From boosting creativity to mastering data quality, this episode dives into how to harness AI for success. Let's get started. Welcome back, everybody, to Stay Sharp in Digital Engineering, the podcast about all things digital related to products from engineering, manufacturing, service, and beyond. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Julianne Grant, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Jonathan Scott.
Hello, everybody.
And one of my favorite people. And today we are welcoming another guest, and we're going to have a really interesting conversation that we've all been hearing about in the industry, especially if you're doing any sort of reading and technology. We're going to be talking about Agentic AI in digital engineering. And today we have a special guest, Rob Ferrone, who we're really glad to have here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Julianne. Thank you, Jonathan.
So Rob is a very technically minded, creative problem solver with more than 35. Sorry, I'm trying to age you.
She's aging you, Rob.
That's me.
I'm the 30 years old.
I'm the 35. You're the 25 years of experience in complex product industries. Rob founded, built, and sold a Forbes FTE top 15 niche consulting and professional services firm. You may have heard of it, called Quick Release. And now he works as an advisor, mentor, and trainer. So you might also know Rob as the product data plumber. So that's another way to find Rob online. So we're really glad to have you here, Rob, to talk about this topic.
Excellent. No, thanks very much for having me here. And I'm a big fan of the podcast. I love listening to your episodes, and I'm, very, very happy that I finally was invited on.
Yeah, no, thanks for joining us, Rob. And I want to just dig right in, right? Because this is a fun topic. But I think we need to set the stage, like Julianne was saying a little bit about this. Most people have heard of AI, but for those who haven't, but are interested in the topic of the podcast, the theme here, AI is artificial intelligence. And I think some academics would probably take issue with how I would define it, but I'm going to steal a definition from Google that I like a lot. It's the field of science concerned with building machines that can reason, learn, and act in such a way that would normally require human intelligence, or that involves data whose scale exceeds what humans can analyze. Seems fair to me, right? In terms of what are we talking about? Hopefully sufficiently broad. But today, I think we want to get into a specific aspect of that, like Julianne mentioned, Agentic AI, and talk about how that relates to what we do in the digital engineering space. So, Rob, let me start there and ask you from your perspective, what is Agentic AI and why the hype in the digital engineering space?
Okay. So when I think of Agentic AI, I think of, I take the A and there's 4 A's. So the first one is that it's about action. So that rather than, I think traditional artificial intelligence is almost quite passive, and the AI agents are actually active. So they can do stuff, they can make decisions, and then influence things outside of the normal remit of general AI. Secondly, there's assorted. So there's not just one AI agent, but there's different types of AI agents. So it's useful to know that, and I think that's something that everyone needs to look into. The other one is autonomy. So these are autonomous. So they can act on their own. They don't need to be prompted to do something. They take information and things will come out the other side. It talks about action, but actually they're autonomous and they can work independently. And the fourth one is I've forgotten what the A is now. Adaptive. So the fourth is that they're adaptive, and so the traditional AI models. They are fed the model and the programming, and that's their view of the world until they get an update by their maker. Whereas the AI agents are actually kind of always learning and improving and bettering themselves. So that's the kind of the way I understand AI agents. And I think why there's hype right now is there's several reasons. So there's obviously technology advances. That's one of the big ones. You've got bigger data models. The actual models themselves are maturing. And also you've got a lot more support. So there's a lot of people investing in this space, and companies are actively looking to use these in the way that they couldn't necessarily use AI, because now they can actually get them to do familiar things like the things that they're doing with their staff.
Well, yeah, and some of the things you mentioned, Rob, make perfect sense there, right? I mean, I think of my use of AI today, and as I experiment and learn and things like that, the things you mentioned about adaptive and action are two big ones, right? Yeah. Autonomous, okay, I can take that for later, but can it do something useful for me? Yeah. And in our world, is it specifically adapted to the kinds of things we do and need to do? So those, I think, your point about why agentic is relevant compared with just general AI is very helpful.
Yeah.
But it prompts me to think of another question that I'm sure our audience is wondering. So why us? Why are we talking about this? We've talked about AI on the podcast before, and in a number of ways. But from your perspective, as we talk about it, we chose to talk about this with you today. Why should people be listening to us having the conversation? What are we bringing in your mind that makes this relevant?
I mean, the challenge is right now you can't go anywhere without there being agent AI stuff down our throats. Whether it's on LinkedIn or other platforms, and conversations, and so it's a noisy space. But I think the advantage of speaking to us about this and what we're going to discuss today is that we're not actually selling anything. So we're not here to sell you, our great AI agents or what we can do for your business. I think we're definitely going to be a part of it, and I think we're definitely going to be the experts that will help guide companies around these topics. But we're not trying to sell you anything. So we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of almost the customer, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? I mean, and I'm going to connect it to an analogy that's probably not fair, but I'm going to do it anyway. If you're the PLM data plumber, right, and I think we think of ourselves in a similar category, working with the data under the hood, if you're very interested in having a butler, he needs indoor plumbing.
I am.
But that's some of what we're talking about with Agentic AI, right? Is
yes.
help for companies, help for what they do, that kind of thing. And to your point, we may not be the folks doing exactly that, but we're connected enough to understand maybe how that works and how it won't work, right? And things that we're talking about there.
Exactly. I mean, you and I, and we've seen a lot of different technologies emerge over time, and we've had customers pulling and vendors etc. pushing, and we're somewhere in the middle to helping the stuff to land and actually the customers to derive value from it. And so this is another one of those where we need to figure it out so that we can best advise the customers. And I think we will have a certain critical lens on the technology, and we won't be hoodwinked by the marketing necessarily or the hype. And I think we will have in our minds some good ideas about the use cases.
Yeah. And that's a perfect way to get into it, right? I know we've got questions, so I'll leave it there in terms of why. I think we've got good things to say, but let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about these use cases. I think there are some out there. I mean, we're all, like you said, using it in our own way, right? So, but how do we see it in digital engineering?
If I can just skip back, what I want to do, yeah. I think I thought of a good example to bring to life the idea of AI versus agent AI. So, for example, with your podcast, you might use AI and say, what is a good topic to discuss in the podcast right now? You use ChatGPT or whatever, you get an answer. With AI agents, you can actually say to your AI agent, I want to run a podcast in a couple of weeks from now. These are the type of people that I want to get onto the podcast. Can you make that happen? And what it will do is it will go away. It will, find out who's available, who would, be the right fit to come onto the podcast. What kind of topics would be the right ones to discuss? Look at both calendars from both parties. Set up the session, using the right software for the podcast, and effectively do all of that for you. And all you have to do is rock on up to the session, and you could even have the agent asking the questions to the group as well.
I love it.
Well, it's interesting because one of our colleagues, Derek Needing, he is a big supporter of using AI and using it in an agentic way. Because he'll pull together some data, he'll put in some information, he'll put in a PowerPoint or he'll put in a spreadsheet, and he'll ask AI to generate something out of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're starting to see a lot more applications of, I'm going to put some information in, help me get some good information back out.
Yeah. And I think that's, as you say, that's, imagine if then the AI agent could then, do the presentation or, you've even got them creating podcasts, et cetera, by themselves now. So.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So now that we've set the table, let's dive into it. Let's talk about those use cases.
Yeah. So what are you seeing for use cases, Rob? I mean, we talked a few things about how people are using agentic AI on their own, but from a digital engineering perspective, what are you seeing?
The answer is absolutely everything you could imagine. So,
that's scary.
and that surprised me as well, because when I first started hearing the term agentic AI, it felt new, but actually I think there's a lot of companies experimenting with it. It's almost been the natural evolution from AI and people trying to figure out what they can do with it. And I think again, when you look at what's out there, you've got topics like generative design, you've got activities in supply chain management, you've got everything related to product data flows, etc. But there are several use cases being discussed and being talked up, and so this is going to affect every single part of the business. Anywhere where you've got humans, anywhere where you've got people making decisions or having to pull together information and then act on the back of the information that they get, that has the potential to be transformed. So it's massive.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's really just has the potential to revolutionize the way people work. General.
and I think maybe
revolutionize is a little too extreme, but change the way we work.
No, I think you're right. I think it could be a revolution. I mean, I'd say that when things like PLM came along, for example, people said this is going to revolutionize your business or it's going to add great value to your business, and I think when you look at the actual use of that kind of technology, it's not really blown anyone away. I think there's people that are using it well. There's people that are struggling with it. There's people that have, tried it and they're trying it again with a different vendor this time. And it's actually quite hard to nail down the absolute benefit the companies are getting from it. There's a lot of investment. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of organizational change. But I think the difference here is that agentic AI is actually going to be doing a lot of the thinking, a bit like humans, but actually with a lot more capacity and being able to solve problems that are more complex than any humans could necessarily solve. And because there's so many different use cases, I think it's almost like having an additional workforce or access to an additional workforce that are superhuman. So that's let's say the optimistic view. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges with that as well. There's a lot of challenges to make that happen, and I think we'll obviously speak about that a bit later on.
I think that's what you just mentioned about having the superhuman workforce or the kinds of workers that maybe you wish you had, but you don't. I think that's an interesting place, right? And coming back to this idea of use cases, one of the ones that I've heard that I think is very relevant, makes sense to me, and this is maybe because I'm simple and I think too simply, but is impact analysis in PLM activities, right? So there's change is a natural thing in product development. When you're making change, you want to understand, well, what does that impact so that you know how big of a change to make, what not to do, what to do, that kind of thing. The idea from that definition of AI that sometimes it's, it's the machine being able to analyze data at a scale that we humans just can't deal with. I think about that from back when I was an engineer, right? Doing impact analysis was a tedious thing. PLM made that better, but it didn't change the fact that when I wanted to modify a component that happened to be used in a lot of places, it was really hard to analyze that. Yeah. Right. And so those kinds of things where, maybe the computer just does the job better or does it differently. It can access more information and bring us something that's really boiled down. That feels like the kind of thing where you say, yeah, it's really a superhuman power. Yeah. That if I could have that for my business and snap a finger, I'd want it. Now, can we make it? That's another issue.
Yeah. And, another good example like that, and it reinforces the idea of being real time, is that let's say the supply chain, we know about all of the supply chain disruption, but let's say one of the suppliers, I don't know, their boat sinks, their parts aren't going to arrive or something happens, there's a material failure. The Agentic AI could then actually reschedule production to mitigate, the risks of not having those components available, even look at other sources and even trigger orders to other suppliers in order to get the, new stock in, and figure all of that out without even, people being aware of that happening. All of a sudden production changes and they don't know why, and but actually, at least production's running. And in the past, that would have been, tens of people involved. Running around with their hair on fire, trying to...
I was going to say, we're going to lose our opportunity to complain.
We can complain about Agentic AI taking our jobs.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
If I could sit back and have a sandwich while all that happens, I'm okay.
Exactly. I mean, it's wonderful that it would happen. But when you think about that, the power and the speed, because you were saying, Jonathan, it's help us identify things we can't see that quickly, right? So the trends, the problem solving that it can do in microseconds.
Yeah, and I mean, when you think about your daily lives, when you're trying to make decisions, the simple things like, okay, which internet provider to go with, or what do I get? German is photovoltaic. What's it called in English? The solar panels. Shall I get solar panel roof? And if I do, what's my energy consumption? Is it worth it? Is it going to amortize, etc.? There's so much information involved in a decision like that, and we do our best to make that decision. But this is the kind of thing that Agentic AI could do, and even then contract the people that are going to come and fit it, and fit that into your schedule, and have worked out, what then also needs to happen in your house. Do you need to get them smart meters or smart technology in order to, take advantage of it? And when should you charge your car, et cetera, et cetera. So
that's the perfect example, right, of the superhuman thing, right? Hey, AI, tell me what I'm not thinking about, right? Think for me a little bit on some of the things that I haven't considered and help me out there. Yeah. So I want to tie that back to our digital engineering topic and say, okay, what do you think, Rob? Prognosticate for me a little bit. What does that mean to the jobs that people do today? The designer, the engineer, the typical roles that we see, the manufacturing engineer, that kind of thing. What does it mean to them if they've got some of these capabilities?
So the optimistic case is that people would join me here in the garden where we sat around having coffee and talking about life before AI agents. But when I printed something out from the World Economic Forum, which talked about jobs in the future, etc., and how many jobs are going to be created versus how many jobs we're losing, and it's definitely a net gain in jobs. So I don't think anyone's going to have too much free time on their hand. I think we'll be doing slightly different things. They talk about us being more creative in our jobs and actually leaning in on our uniquely human skills more and more, and that's a nice idea. I think the transform. We need to go on a learning journey, right? So every single person in an organization, not just the people in the IT department or the chiefs in the business, every single person needs to understand what this type of technology can do, how you work with it, how you take advantage of it. How would you apply it in the work that you're doing and the work that your team is doing. I think the most important thing for everyone to have at this time is two things: growth mindset and curiosity. I think if everyone has that, then I think we'll be able to adapt to whatever comes.
Yeah, I've heard that in the past, and it makes sense to me as well, right? That if you can adapt, that's what's going to happen. Is there's going to be rapid change. There'll be things that you used to do that added value that no longer can you add that value because something, an agentic AI, can do it much faster. So you have to move to, well, if I had free time, what would I do? How would I add value in a different way? And that's that growth mindset you mentioned.
Yeah, and this has got the potential to also change how businesses work as well. There's things get done in the way they're done, and the products that are being created are very human. So I can't. There's a phrase. Do you watch Severance? Because I did an article on Severance, and
my son keeps trying to get me to watch it, and I haven't yet.
Watch it; it's brilliant. Anyway, I can't remember the phrase. You'll have to find it and pop it up later on. But it relates to kind of what humans can imagine, and whatever we can imagine, we can actually realize. So I think that's the world that we have today. But as soon as you have AI in the loop, AI agents in the loop, thinking about the products and services that humans need and would buy, etc., you could see solutions out there and types of products, types of production, types of services that we hadn't even thought of. They weren't even on our radar, and that could completely change the way that businesses operate. It could completely change the way that we buy things, and so actually the very definition of work, not just work itself, but work and businesses could completely change.
That's mind blowing.
It is. And it strikes me that it's going to require a whole new way to learn and consume information because, when you think about in the beginning of ChatGPT and when it came out and it's, everyone was like, oh, well, it'll help me write this faster. Or, we got students trying to, put together papers much quicker using AI. And we have, ways to actually track that. But the thing is, and humans, if there's an easier way to do it, we're going to figure that out, right? So the challenge is that this is going to leapfrog the way we can learn, but also how we apply this technology. And I think there's going to be somewhat of a big learning curve for us to figure out what that is and how we can quickly apply it. I mean, even for me in marketing, I'm seeing it as I think we were talking about this before we jumped on the call. But search engine optimization. You used to have to go to Google and go to search engine optimization and get your website up to date. Well, now it's really about how do you feed these engines, right? These AI engines, because you want to be. I'm finding I'm using the AI engines more for search versus anything else.
Yeah.
So because it pulls a whole lot of different data than a Google might now. So what does that mean for how do you feed those engines to get your company into that information? So I just think that it's the amount of shifting that's going to happen. It's going to happen so fast that it may be difficult to keep up with.
And think about this as well. There's whether they're using AI agents with stock trading, etc. Sometimes it's making decisions that no human. They talk about the kind of black box. Where actually humans don't understand why those decisions have been made. There's some very complicated logic behind those decisions that we can't fathom, and therefore you'll be working with parts of the business where they're making decisions that don't make sense to us, but somehow you have to kind of go along with it, and then you start to think, okay, who's working for who, and what's my role in this world, in this industry, in this business?
Yes,
that's where the answer about the future gets darker, right?
Yeah, but I'm feeling a little bit like, okay, so we're way far into the future. Can we get a little practical about right now how, in a digital engineering environment, what could be a way to change something in a positive approach?
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've probably got ahead of ourselves. I think when you look at what it takes to implement AI agents, by the way, it's months to years of effort. It's a lot of people, a lot of money. It all starts with the vision. What do you want to do with it? What's the intent of how you're going to apply this? And there's obviously business strategy. Do you do small experiments? Do you set up do you provide all of this technology to the team and let them have a go and kind of figure out what they can do with it? And so you're doing it at the front end, and then you get to the let's say the biggest hurdle, which affects companies today, which has affected the implementation of a lot of the digital technology. This is why why digital twins aren't ubiquitous. It's the simple nuts and bolts of good quality data and connected information flows across different systems. So that has got to be the bedrock of companies' ability to leverage agentic AI. And so I think companies have got a long way to go to even get that right. So I think that's going to be the work that all of us need to be doing before we can really start figuring out then how you're going to apply then agentic AI to your business. Because if they haven't got the sources of information, or if the data is not good, then that you can imagine what kind of decisions are going to be made. They'll be made because for all the intelligence that you get with AI and AI agents, ultimately they are informed by the information that they consume.
Right.
And so, we may have experiences that we can then, we've been learning for all our young lives, and so we can, you've got cross learnings that you can be applied to the work that we're doing, but the AI agents don't have that. They've got huge brains and they've got reasoning, etc. But still, if the data set is poor, it's small, if it's not well informed, if it's biased, then that's going to affect the outcome.
Well, we certainly heard about that, right? With not agentic AI, but the general AI and large language models. You mentioned bias. A lot of research that's gone on in that. I don't know that it's a solved problem either, right? But that we understand that concept to be true, which is the data set that the AI is trained on directly impacts the quality of the output from the AI. Absolutely. And when we apply that in our digital engineering space, we have to be cognizant of it, right? I mean, I think about a specific example. I know that when engineers look at migrated data in a PLM system, they very quickly can identify problems, right? Oh, I was around when that happened. That data set's not right. It got linked wrong, whatever it is. And AI wouldn't have any ability to do that necessarily, but it would take that bad data at face value and then make decisions based on it. And that's dangerous.
Yeah. Absolutely. And if you've got a large company with several different product lines, and let's say the data for some of the product lines is good, the data for the other product lines is not good or even missing, or they haven't got access to it, then, they're going to be biased in the sense that they may favor certain product lines,
right.
When they're thinking about, when they're optimizing product development processes, etc.
Yeah, I think those are good examples of what we need to be watching out for and thinking about, particularly as it relates to our industry.
Because coming back to use cases and what we can proactively do to think about them, I think look at the work that you do every day that is repetitive, that is not necessarily value add. If it's copying and pasting information from one place to another or searching for information, perhaps it's work that's done in a team where you've had to, take information from one dashboard and you end up putting it in a PowerPoint or, any of these things where you think, actually, if you had some kind of smart automation, the RPA, for example, robotic process automation has been around for a while, but it's taken that to a next level. So I think there's a brilliant Sankey diagram the other day that, forgive me, I'm going to forget his name now, but he put it on LinkedIn and you can find it. We'll put it in the chat. But it's this beautiful view of all the different types of activities that are done by an engineer, and activities that will then continue to be done by an engineer, and then activities that will get pushed across to agentic AI. So I think if people have that kind of Sankey diagram in mind, when they're thinking about the work that they do. We did a great study actually one time. It was called Time to Engineer study, and we looked at the work that engineers were doing, and we broke it down into all of the component parts. What for example, meetings were they in, and of those meetings, what were the ones that they had to be in, or where they're adding value, and what were the meetings where they weren't adding any value? It was just a status update that could have been taken from the system.
Right.
So I think if people start to break the work down in that way, then that will inform. That's the kind of things, the hopper of ideas that companies will need, to kind of feed the projects.
To build out the use cases that they want to pursue, right, and where they want to place their bets in terms of investment. Yeah. So I want to take that along with something we were just discussing and pivot a little, right, and talk about the future. So that's how people might determine the use cases and decide what they want to pursue. What do you think it's going to take to bring the concepts into reality? We talked a little bit about data quality, right? So as a general category, but what else? I mean, are the PLM systems ready for it? Are there other things that we need to do that are going to get us where we want to be?
I think this is the interesting question, because how much can AI and agentic AI solve the problem of systems that aren't connected, businesses where you have people working in silos? Is it that agentic AI kind of puts its hands up and says, call me when you're ready, or can they be an enabler, and can they do the work to connect systems and connect people and connect data, and actually then be part of the solution? And I don't have an answer for that yet. I haven't seen enough to say how much that's possible. I mean, it's great if that could be the case, but otherwise there's tons of work to be done. Like I said, the investment on your tech stack. Once let's assume that your data is good and it flows. Then what tech stack are you going to bring in? What parts of the business are you going to be doing experiments, and how are you going to be doing these experiments? And how are you going to be measuring the value? What are you going to do if you free people up, or what are you going to do with that? Because I think there's when I look, I think Porsche has got a really good. The German company that make cars, they've got a really good, let's say, use cases for agentic AI, but the question is, they've made lots of people redundant, not because of agentic AI, but because the business is not, doing well, and they've taken a hit like many companies have with, electric vehicles, etc. So, it's not a magic wand, and so the question is, how are you going to use this to make your business perform? And is it going to be just enough to stay competitive, or is it actually going to, bring new value and unlock opportunities? That's the, what's a hygiene factor versus something that's going to take your business to the next level.
I think that you bring up an interesting point about how much can you sort of turn these tools loose on your existing environment? And what I hear in that, the thing that I pull out is judgment, right? That AI, we're asking it to make decisions, to help us with information and that sort of thing. But when we take it to the level of judgment and very soft skills and the kinds of things that, business leaders and consultants like us would do, can it get there? Can it make those choices? And what it makes me think is, I don't know, how would you train it, right? And that's always the question is, well, is there a data set you would train it on? Could I show it these cases of how we run businesses today and what technology projects we do? And would that help it understand when we're ready and that kind of thing? I don't know. But that's what I hear and the point you're making.
So I can't remember what prompted me to think about this, but if like these days you get AI in meetings and they take the agendas. So imagine in every meeting in your organization you had an AI agent there taking the minutes. So they can understand how discussions happened, how people ran meetings, and perhaps they would even then run the meetings themselves in the future. And then you've got all of the communication that happens in the organization through email, email, through company presentations, all the issues tickets and the engineering issues that get raised, how they're solved, engineering change. So let's say it consumed all of that information and understood how people interacted, how they worked together, what people said. Obviously, there's water cooler conversations that it wouldn't be able to unless you had it listing in the offices, which I don't think people would be happy about. But let's assume that you could collect all that information. It'd be really interesting to know, what it would then make of that. And if you said to him, okay, so how do we make our business run better? What should we be doing, or how should we be making decisions? Whether or not it could come give us answers, and even how much of it could do itself, so actually, you didn't go to a meeting, because when you kind of rocked up to your, laptop, it kind of said, this is the most important task that you have to do today. Here's all the information you need to do it. Let me have your, this specific human value that no one else can do in the company, or that I can't do. You do that. And then, I'll go off and do the rest and connect it to all the other people that need to know about it. Maybe, but if it's like that, who wants to just turn up and sit at a laptop and have stuff kind of thrown at them that they have to then process, and then the next without having the chats and the arguments and the discussions and the brainstorming.
Yes. That's right. Welcome to the Matrix. Go have a seat in your pod. Yes. I'll let you know when I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
So true.
So it's and how much. The other question is like, how much of this can we influence ourselves, right? You talked about the
That's
future
right.
and where this is going to go and how is this going to affect people. So is this let's say executives getting in a big consultancy company that then works out how to do this to their company? Is it are companies going to be willing to have ground up ideas from the employees? How much will we be able to steer the future so that we end up having these beautiful, wonderful jobs which are creative, challenging, purposeful, every day's learning, versus just being a resource that is tapped for the unique human value that we can provide. Coming back to severance, it's
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I think the hard part right now is trying to see through the hype, because I think, I think I read news releases every day that has something about agentic AI in it. Even in the PLM vendor space, you're starting to see, new releases with AI tools or AI capabilities. And so the question just becomes, how do we start parsing all this stuff to understand, well, what is it really doing? How is it really helping me? And I don't have an answer to that, because I don't know enough about the different products, but I know I've been reading about the press releases, and I think there's a high majority that include AI in a headline now. So,
yeah, and I mentioned earlier on that I know some companies are making technology available to the employees for them to experiment with, and as part of a structured learning process, because I think companies have a responsibility to educate the workforce and actually this is. I think the workforce and employees are so often underestimated in terms of the value that they can bring in terms of their ideas and their improvement potential. One of the big complaints you have about consultants is that they kind of turn up, take your watch, and then tell you the time. And the employees have been saying, "Look, I've been telling you this the whole time. Why does no one listen to me?" And so I think this is one of these situations where if you can inform the employees and have them understand what is the potential and how this could apply, and that they're safe, that they're not going to be their jobs aren't going to be cut, and that there will be wonderful work to do, then those types of companies, I think, will be the ones that stand the best chance of success in terms of adopting this technology and profiting from it.
I think that one is going to be challenging. What a point you just made, Rob. And I saw it as a challenge 10, 15 years ago in our space, but I think it will be an even bigger one with agentic AI. And that is the companies making their employees comfortable that this won't impact their jobs, right? That like, oh, you'll still have a job tomorrow. Well, companies have a hard time with that today when the economy goes up and down, regardless of technology. But when they start talking about bringing in things that will enhance the way we do things, help us make better decisions, I mean, I'll admit it, it concerns me, right? When I think about what my career looks like 10 years from now, there's probably a lot of things that agentic AI could do that I do day in and day out. Will I still be able to adapt and add that value, or will it make me redundant? I don't know, right? We'll see. But it is difficult, I think, for companies to make people comfortable with that as they try and do these experiments and find these things. And I don't have an answer for it. But when you said that, I was like, yeah, you're right. It would be great for companies to do that. Can they? You know,
I mean, if you look at the amount of, because I was doing some research on if companies are successfully applying this technology, what does it mean then? What's the benefit in terms of percentage of time saved? And at the moment, it's they're really talking about 10% of someone's time being saved, and obviously across a large group of people, that's a lot of time being saved. But it's not necessarily going to make big groups of people redundant. The question is then, what do companies then do with all of that extra capacity? How can they use it? Is it improving quality? So there's, it's going to be interesting. But I think there's going to be so much work to be done that even when the work changes, and even if technology takes up more of the kind of work that we're either not mentally equipped to do, or we don't enjoy doing because it's boring or repetitive or annoying, I think there's going to be so much more to do that I think we will be so busy running after all of that new work that actually I think the employees won't have enough time to worry about about not having a job, I think.
I like that. I like that view. I hope that's the case, right?
Yes, and let's put a pin on that, because I think we're coming up on our time here, and it's been a very interesting conversation, and clearly not the end of the conversation. I think it's just the very beginning, and it's a fascinating area. Any last thoughts, comments, gentlemen, before we close out on things that we should be thinking about?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, we should kind of play this back in 10 years from now and
exactly.
see how we all look and see how stressful or easy our lives have been. But also pick apart all of the stuff we said and
see where we're at,
hold ourselves to account and say, oh, we got that right, we got that wrong. And that would be interesting.
I hope when we do, we're chuckling.
Yeah, because I just can't imagine it's going to be beyond even our imagination at this point.
Yeah.
So
I think it will. I think it's going to change the world more than we realise. And but saying that, I've had a stressful 3 days because my internet went down for like 3 days, and it caused absolute chaos. So the kids are going mad because they didn't have access to all the stuff that they used to. None of my all of my automated garden watering stopped working, and
so we're still dealing with software.
So imagine, if you've got all these AI agents and they stop working, or there's a glitch, and it could bring your company to a standstill. So I think there's a lot of work to implement this technology. There's a lot of potential. There's a lot to be excited about. I think humans are wonderful adapters, and I think everyone should. I know it can be scary, but I think the best thing people can do is lean into it and enjoy the journey, and be able to look back and tell our children and the grandchildren that we were part of this huge generational change, and that we were the pioneers that helped bring it all in and hopefully change the world for the better.
Right. Hopefully did it right.
Yeah. Otherwise, if it all goes wrong, I think we'll be having kind of different kind of conversations, and our lifestyles will be very different. And we'll be worried about hunting rabbits and making
the Terminator movie comes to mind. Okay, so well, with that, thank you so much today, Rob, for your participation in this conversation. It's been very good.
Yeah, this has been great, Rob. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for having me on.
And we'd love to keep the door open and have you come back.
Thank you.
Because I think there's more to talk about here, and we can
sure. And I love the work you do. I love not just the podcasts but the business, and I think I would encourage anyone who comes into contact with you and is invited to be on the podcast. I'd encourage them to come on because you're lovely people and it's fun and interesting and engaging. And thank you for the opportunity.
Oh,
thank you, Rob. Very kind.
And thank you, Jonathan. It's always a pleasure to talk with you as well. And for our audience, thank you so much for listening today. We welcome your questions. If you like this podcast, please give it a like. And if you have any comments or questions for Rob, please put them on the post that you're reading. And we'd love to have that conversation and continue that. We always welcome your questions and input for this episode, or maybe what do you think we should talk about for Agentic AI for a future episode? Please give us your thoughts. With that, we hope you tune in to our episodes. And until next time, everybody, stay sharp.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for being here and listening to this episode of Stay Sharp in Digital Engineering with Razorleaf. If you have any questions, please leave us a comment on our post or send us an email to podcast@razorleaf.com. We love hearing from you. And if you like this podcast, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform or on our YouTube channel. Until next time, stay sharp.